Video is designed to clarify the way in which dominant chords are expected to resolve and the relationship between the related to and the dominant chord. And we're using the interface of the circle of fifths as a way to help us compute this. This is one way to think about it. Okay, this is the circle of fifths, as you know, when we go the typical way that it's drawn. And when we go counterclockwise, we are going down in fifths, perfect fifths. When we go clockwise, we are going up in perfect fifths. Well, the typical, historically typical progressive sound in harmony is something that includes a lot of cycle 5 motion, meaning down in perfect fifths, this direction. And there's something inherently that communicates a kind of feeling of forward motion about this kind of root motion. It has to do with the overtone series and other things, which is beyond the scope of this video to get into it. But if you accept the hypothesis that cycle 5 root motion is progressive, it makes you feel like you are progressing going forward, then that explains why so many chord progressions have a large percentage of the root motion going in this direction, that is down in perfect fifths. Now, a dominant chord, by its very nature and its internal tritone and everything, sets up expectation that the next chord will be down in perfect fifths. So if I play this G7 and then I go to that C, it feels very expected. And the same thing if I do this A7. And I have a tension in there, so if I was to make it a really simpler sound, like just make it a triad, it would be even more obvious to anyone who's maybe not used to listening to sort of jazz harmony, but it feels very expected. When you add the tensions and everything, it becomes a little bit more, it's still expected, but it's colored more. So there's a little bit more tension in the sound. But anyway, the point is that dominant chords set up expectation that the next chord after them will be a chord whose root is down a perfect fifth. And if you know your cycle of fifths well, you can easily see that. You see A, and if you go in this direction, your next chord will be a D. And the G chord, if you go in the direction of the circle of fifths, the next chord, of course, will be C. So for the purposes of this video, I'm calling this the direction of progression. All right, now there's another element, which is a subdominant to dominant element that started to become very popular, especially in the 20th century, but also before that, which is the sound of a minor chord, minor triad, a minor seventh, or even a minor 7 flat 5, that then progresses down a fifth to a dominant chord. And this is a subdominant to dominant relationship in the grand scheme of things. Of course, this is a subdominant chord in the key. But in this relationship, whenever this happens, there's an element of any other relationship like this emulating the 2 and the 5 of a key. So this relationship, that is a minor 7 chord, which is a fifth above a dominant chord, going down a fifth to that dominant chord, is called a 2-5 relationship. Even if the chord is not the 2 chord in the key, like here, it's still in a 2-5 relationship. And at Berkeley, we use this symbol of a bracket to describe a 2-5 relationship. And that's important because it's a relationship that exists above and beyond the individual function of the chord. So for example, here, this literally is a subdominant chord, but this is actually a tonic function chord. But it's also in a 2-5 relationship with this dominant chord. So this is an example of a chord that we would call dual function. It's being the 3 chord in the key, but it's also serving as a related 2 of the dominant chord. And the related 2 relationship is also based on the circle of fifths, because as you can see, it's a fifth above the dominant, so it goes down a fifth to the dominant. So that progression that you see right here, E, A, D, G, you can just follow it right along the circle of fifths, E, A, D, G. So the bottom line is it's really helpful to get to know your circle of fifths. It's really helpful to be able to compute the interval down a fifth when you're studying harmony. It's important to know that down a fifth is the same as up a fourth. So if you find it easier to think up a perfect fourth, maybe because you play an instrument that's tuned in fourths like the guitar or the bass, you can do that. So up a fourth from C is F, down a fifth from C is F. You can think about it either way. It's just that it's typically referred to as down a fifth. But you want to get really good at computing this relationship because it's going to be really helpful for you. Now, another way to think about it in terms of practicality is if you know where you want to go, what your target is. Like if I want to know what is the related to of A7, I have to go the other way, right? And the other way is up a fifth. And if you know how to spell chords, all you have to do is think of the fifth of the chord. So the fifth of an A chord is E. That means E minor 7 will be the related to of A7. And you can just practice it. You can say, what's the related to of B flat? Okay, F minor. What's the related to of A flat? E flat minor. What's the related to of G7? D minor, right? And then you can do it the other way. What's the target of an E7 chord? Some kind of A chord. What's the target of a G flat chord? Some kind of D flat chord. And I'm sorry, it goes the other way. When we're at this point, we have this crossover, so you have to decide how you're going to think about it. So I should have gone the other way. What's the target of a D flat chord? Some kind of G flat chord, etc. What's the target of a G flat or F sharp chord, C flat or B? You know, these are enharmonics. That's the other thing you want to be clear on is your enharmonics here. Okay, so this is the bottom line of this video is to help you realize that there is a practical way to get good at figuring out these relationships and understanding these relationships, and that practicality can be linked to your knowledge of the circle of fifths. This is just one of the many ways in which circle of fifths is helpful in the study of music. And one final thing, it's very important to try to play and hear, consciously notice the sound that cycle 5 progressions create. Because first of all, it's very common and it's a very useful device to be aware of and to use in your own music. But also, if you really appreciate that, then you can also appreciate times when there isn't cycle 5 motion and how that kind of changes the forward motion quotient and changes the momentum of a piece of music when you break out of the cycle. But anyway, here's an example. Here's what this sounds like.